good evening, good morning, good afternoon. I guess that depends on where you are. As Jen said, I've done a lot of training in Tableau. And so what I'm about to tell you is the story of how Tableau caused me to learn JavaScript. But so first of all, remember how I said that I teach Tableau quite a bit. And in my trainings, I spend like an inordinate amount of time on all the fundamentals. So concepts like discrete and continuous, and how the mark shelf menus will change depending on whether or not you have fills inside of there, and if those fills are discrete or if they're continuous. And I do this because I want my students to be able to think of a chart, to imagine a chart, and know exactly how to build it, right? And so a few months ago, I kind of just took this a step further by integrating some outside tools, right? So I imagined something and then I built it. And so here is that story. So I was sitting there in the office one day, and I originally had an Excel file, and part of it was this comments section, right? And so I'd done everything that I could possibly do with the Excel file, all the analysis that I could, but I wanted to analyze this text, right? And so the first thing that came to mind was that I could do a word count, right? And so I've written scripts to do a word count in some other with some other tools, but as always, I figure it's best just to stand on the shoulders of giants, those that have come before you. And I found a little add-in for Microsoft Word, and so this counts the words, and then it outputs another Word document with the unique words and the number of occurrences. So from there, I just Control-C'd and Control-V'd into Tableau. So it created the data source from my clipboard, and I added Word, and I just created a simple bar chart with Word, and then the sum of count. I actually renamed that field. But at this point, I was kind of stuck because I've used all my dimensions and all my measures, except for the default ones that Tableau provides for me. And so I'm just sitting there like thinking, okay, what else can I do with this? And so I sat there for about 20 minutes. And finally I just go to my best friend, Google, and I just start searching. And so I'm thinking, okay, maybe like sentiment analysis. No. And then, I'm just like analyze text documents. I'm trying to find something. And then finally I press Control F, and that's when the inspiration hits me, right? So when I press Control F, I realized that all of these words are highlighted based on what I'm searching for, right? So these are highlighted. And then I also have this scroll bar on the side that shows me the position. So now I can see if the words are clustered in any area of the document, or if they're spread out pretty evenly. And so now we're good to go. I've got an idea. I'll put on headphones, start up Spotify, and then go from there, right? So step one was to get my web page to show up in my dashboard. And I'm sure most of you are familiar that we can just add a web page to our dashboards in Tableau, right? And so my first idea was to take this Word document, put it into Google Docs, right? And then from there, I thought, okay, maybe Google Docs has an API, and from there, I can maybe with URL parameters or something, because I want to use URL actions, right? If I can use URL actions, then I can affect what's in my web page, because I'm sending different information to the server, right? So I'm basically trying to figure this out, and it's a dead end. So there's just not enough information on any APIs that Google has. And so I could have just sort of gave up there, but I was listening to music, and so I was inspired. And so at that point, I thought to myself, okay, well, wait a minute. This is just a web page, right? I mean, I know what a web page is. So about like 5 or 6 years ago, so a similar situation came up where I had an idea and I wanted to create a website based on that, but I knew nothing about the internet. right? And so I watched a few videos, and I learned about HTML and CSS, and then I watched a video on JavaScript, and I got the concept of it down, but I never went into like the to actually writing any code, right? And so it was actually very inefficient the way I was doing it. I had an FTP server, and I was making changes in the HTML and CSS, and then I was actually moving them to the domain that I bought into that folder to see the changes on the live site. And so that was just not the way to do things. But real quickly, I just want to go over these, basically the 3 parts to a web page so that everyone's on the same page. I mean, I didn't study computer science, so I studied business administration. But if you are more technical and that's your background, well, then most of this talk's probably going to be pretty simple for you. So I apologize in advance. But to get everyone on the same page, I'm just going to go over these 3 concepts. So HTML is all the content, basically, right? So that's the text, it's the images, it's the content, right? And if you open up Chrome and you right-click and choose Inspect Elements, then it will pull up the Chrome developer tools, and you can see all of this, okay? So CSS is the styling. Right, so here what I'm doing is I'm taking these elements here, and I'm changing the color to purple. And so when I say styling, I mean, size, position, color, all of the style attributes of the content. And then finally, we have JavaScript, right? So here in this example, we have a form, okay? And in this form, you have these password fields, but there's conditions. So the password has to satisfy these conditions. And if they don't, and you try to click create my account, then some message will pop up and it'll say, hey, you need a password that's at least this many characters long and has at least these many types of characters, so a letter, a number, etc. Right? And so that's all the logic that's contained in the JavaScript, right? So JavaScript is the logic, CSS is the styling, and HTML is the content. So since Google Docs went nowhere, my next idea was, okay, well, maybe I could just take like a local HTML file that I have on my computer, right? And then just try the path for that. So like C/my documents and then whatever.html, right? But unfortunately in Tableau, when you try that, you're only allowed to use actual URLs that are based on HTTP and HTTPS. So, okay, that's not going to work. But luckily, I've been to a lot of different like technical conferences and stuff. And so there's always this idea of localhost, right? I see people typing in localhost in the browser, and I'm like, okay, well, that localhost thing, it kind of sounds like you're hosting this content on your local computer, right? And so I figure, okay, well, then you have a web server on your computer. And it turns out, after a little bit of Googling, that Windows actually comes with a web server. You just have to make sure it's turned on. So you just go to, programs and features, and then make sure that IIS, Internet Information Services, is turned on. And then once you have that, then this should be the default directory, but this is where all your content will go. This is where all your HTML, your CSS, and your JavaScript will go. And so it's I think this is the default directory. It's inetpubs and www root, right? So what I did was I just took all of the text from that Word document. I threw it in between the body tags in an HTML document. And you can see that it's in that folder, right? So it's that, and then I created a TFF for Tableau Fringe Festival and test.html, right? Okay, so awesome. Now I have my bar chart, and I added this web page, and we're good to go, right? So step 1 is complete. Well, not quite. So I could do this at any point, but the next thing I'm going to do is add that URL action, right? And so if I go to dashboard and actions, I don't have it up right now, but I'm sure most of you are familiar with URL actions. You can add the action, and then you can add a dimension or a measure into the URL. So as a URL parameter, right? So I'm using that localhost and TFF test.html. I'm using a question mark to show that it's the that's the first parameter. It would be an ampersand for any additional parameters after that. Text to highlight is what I'm naming it. And then the word is this dimension right here. So when I select, it will change this word from a to that to of and etc. Right? Okay, so step 2. Now I just need to find or write a script to get the URL parameter and store it in a variable. And so I'll go to a quick demo for that. Luckily, as I've said before, I like to take what other people have done and just try to modify it, try to figure it out if I can. And so I found this little script right here. It even comes with a YouTube video explaining it. And so it's basically just a function that will take the full URL. It's going to split it based on these parameters into an array. And then for each of those parameters, we're going to split it on the equal sign, right? So on the left side, we will have our...
Hey, Thomas.
Yep.
This is a great explanation, but all I see right now is a demo, words, and a black screen.
Oh, no. Okay.
That's okay. You didn't go too far, so let's just go back.
Yeah. So you see demo and a black screen. Okay. Do you see step 3 now?
I do.
Okay. Oh, wow. That's too bad. Okay. If you just give me 1 second, I'm just going to end the show. And so you probably can't see my screen now, can you? Nope.
No, we don't see the screen.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Can you see it now?
Yep.
Okay. And how about now? Good?
Yep.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. For some reason, just when I switched to Visual Studio Code, it got rid of it. Okay. So this is Visual Studio Code. You can use any text editor, right, to edit these documents. I just like this because it shows you how it shows you what you have so that everything's colored, right? And so I'm in that folder within the WW root that I mentioned, and then Tableau Fringe Festival. And so within this test.html, I have that text that I mentioned earlier, and then I have these scripts. So in this main.js script I was mentioning, as I was saying, you get the full URL here. It splits it based on the ampersand, right? And then you iterate through that, and you split through each of the URL parameters on the equal sign. So on one side, you have the name of the URL parameter, and the other side, you have the value, right? And then, so what you're doing is you're returning the value here, okay? And so that's the most important thing for this part. At the end, we're going to console.log so that we can see if we are getting our value for the URL parameter, right? So if I open up Chrome real quick, and I'm just going to Control R to reload that again. And, oh, it's in the way. Okay. So, I need to actually enable it. That might help. So I'm going to uncomment that script and make it there. And so I'm going to reload that. And you can see that showed up because we did that console.log. That was on line 21, right? And so you can see that our URL parameter is that's our value. And so we're good. So now we can move on to the next step, right? So now what we want to do is find or write a script to highlight the word in the URL parameter. And so going back to another demo, I found this mark.js, and that will take care of this portion. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to go back to Chrome, reload the page, and you can see that now I have the highlighting done. And if I open up Tableau, you can see that now I have my highlighting, right? So now there's only one more step. I just have to create that scroll bar. So going back to Visual Studio Code, most of the logic is done within this main.js, but I am going to enable this style sheet, and I'll open up main.js. I don't necessarily need to show this. Let's see, I have about 4 minutes left. Okay. So essentially here, we're creating the mark. This already happened before. But right here is when we're passing in that value and then all these options. So this tells us to create the percentage. Basically, it calculates the position on the page for that word, it turns that into a percentage, and then it adds a new element for the scroll bar. And so that's basically how it works. So at this point, I think I already enabled it. I'm going to go to Chrome. I'm going to reload. Maybe I didn't. Let's go here. Save that. Go to Chrome. Reload that. And so now you can see that I've basically got everything. I've got everything that I wanted. So I'm highlighting the word. I've got my scroll bar on the side, and I've got the position that the word is located on marked there within the document. And if I go back to Tableau, now you can see that I have that, right? So now I can see where the clusters are. And what's really great about this is all that setup is done. So as long as I have another, I can just add another HTML file, use those same references. So here I have the annual report for Tableau for 2016. And this won't work because I changed the names of things. But let's see if I can show that. Okay, I already have that there. So let's save that. And I'm going to go to Tableau, and within Dashboard 2, I filtered out some of the smaller words so I could see, like, okay, where in the annual report do we mention revenues, right? And it looks like, yeah, it's not going to work because I changed those links right at the end yesterday. But the point is, it's all set up and it's ready to go. And so just showing that. And that is the story. You've already seen that. That is the story of how Tableau taught me JavaScript. So from there, a couple of days later, I found out about the Tableau JavaScript API. And then even, I think just a couple weeks after that, maybe a month after that, the developer preview was launched for the extensions API, and that also uses JavaScript. But now I just need that inspiration again. I need some idea and some way to actually apply the knowledge and to build something. So if you'd like to collaborate on anything, if you have any ideas, then here's my contact information, and that's it. Thank you. I think that's it on time. So I don't know. Jen, do you want me to answer some questions, or Emily?
We had a nice work compliment from Andy Piper, so good job there. I think that it'd be interesting to have some of that, either the workbook or the code. How do you kind of foresee sharing that?
I can share it any way that you want. I can share the PowerPoint. I can share the code. I can share any way that makes the most sense. Put on.
Sure. Usually code goes up to GitHub. Do you have an account?
I do, yeah.
Great. If you can post it up there, that way you can still own the content, and
Yep.
then reference it in your slides if you want to add that to it.
Yeah, I can do that.
Great. So how exactly did it come about? I mean, I know that you had this need, you were trying to solve it, but like coming from not knowing JavaScript to finding a solution, how did you get some of your ideas that came through? How did you work through?
Yeah, so it was basically just Google, right? So I went through, like I figured, okay, I know I can, with the URL actions, I can add a URL parameter. I already knew what URL parameters were because I've worked in other languages and called some APIs and stuff. So it's not like I had to learn everything about like variables and looping. Like I have worked in some other languages, but I just had never worked with JavaScript, right? And so from there, I knew, okay, I need to pass this URL parameter into a variable, and that's my value, right? So literally just Google, how do you pass a URL parameter to JavaScript? Well, watch a video, find a script, and same thing. How do you highlight a word with JavaScript? Watch some videos, same thing. A lot of stepping through code, debugging, and Stack Exchange. So, and it took me about an afternoon to do all that. It probably took me longer to create the presentation than it did to actually build it the first time. Does that fully answer your question? Uh-oh.
Oh, no.
Okay.
So I'm not sure about Jen's question, but actually I just wanted to, maybe one last question here that we have in the chat is that now that you've been down this journey for a while, are there any particular references, blogs, etc., that you can recommend?
Specifically for like, specifically for JavaScript or for Tableau or?
Well, I'm gonna.
Yeah.
I mean, let's see, for JavaScript.
For JavaScript, I found this really cool, like free course that this guy has. It's like called 30 for 30. The idea is like you do one JavaScript exercise every day. So I thought that was one of the first like tutorials that I did after I did this little project. And that's really the only one. I use W3 Schools a lot. Just if there's like a concept I don't know, like I didn't really use arrays too much here, but if I was having trouble figuring out like how to pass an object or like how to make an array of objects, I go there, mock up some sample code, figure out the logic, and then come back and implement it in my own scripts. But I mean that pretty much applies for all different languages and technologies. So I hope that answers it. But other than that, Stack Exchange, because then you can ask questions there, very specific questions, and half the time just writing the problem down and figuring out what you need to solve is like half the work.